Let me ask you a question. When White Diamond was reaching for Steven's gem, what if Bismuth, Peridot, and Lapis arrived in her ship just a few moments earlier? Steven Universe has one of the most controversial endings in all of cartoon history, for ending exactly how everyone thought it would. A good number of animation fans don't really like how Change Your Mind handled the diamonds, the common sentiment being that Yellow, Blue, and especially White Diamond were all left off the hook too easy. They didn't face any consequences for their actions. Now, I get this critique to an extent because yeah, Change Your Mind is really fast-paced, and while Blue becoming an ally was something they teased since her introduction, and they showed the cracks with Yellow, White denounced her wicked ways within a couple of minutes, which is kinda whack. But at the same time, it really wasn't a surprise that the series where the main character converts nearly every threat into an ally would end with him doing just that with the biggest threat in the galaxy. It's rushed and has some questionable execution for sure, but it's well known by now that they didn't have a choice but to rush it because countries afraid of gay people weren't messing with Ruby and Sapphire's wedding. Nevertheless, the idea that Steven Universe redeems dictators has followed online discussion around the series for years, and it's an idea that I think strips all nuance and context from the situation. Now, in spite of all of this, I still can't help but to be a creative little goober and ponder, what if things turned out differently for the diamonds? What if they were shattered, or bubbled, or even reincarnated? These are all scenarios I've been itching to explore, and so over the course of 3 videos, we'll be doing just that. Don't worry, they're all written. This won't be a Steven Universe rewritten situation. Though who knows, I still might make a sequel. 7 years later is better than never. YouTube just doesn't like it when I'm not uploading as fast as possible, so this is the best approach. But when all is said and done, you can expect a compilation over on Roundtable Rewind, which has new compilations themed around the Diamonds Anvil cipher that you can check out right now. It's a great way to show support and keep yourself entertained. Let me ask you a question. When White Diamond was reaching for Steven's gem, what if Bismuth, Peridot, and Lapis arrived in her ship just a few moments earlier? Well, I think that could potentially change everything. Let's set the stage. Back on Earth, Bismuth stayed behind, weighed down by centuries of mistrust towards the diamonds. But when news reaches her that Steven's life is in danger, she doesn't hesitate to spring into action. Bismuth rallies Peridot and Lapis, and true to her nature, she's not showing up empty-handed. You already know that Bismuth stays strapped, so she would likely prepare for the worst case scenario. Her plan? A brand new weapon. Fast forward to Homeworld, and Steven's gem is moments away from being torn out by White Diamond. Steven begins to lose consciousness, feeling excruciating pain as his gem gets slowly ripped out of his stomach. He closes his eyes, bracing himself and submitting to fate. The crystal gems are completely powerless under White's control. All hope seems lost, but then a shockwave rips through the room. Steven collapses as White Diamond's grip falters. All eyes turn to the source of the explosion. Bismuth, Peridot, and Lapis burst onto the scene, and they're not here to negotiate. At least, Bismuth isn't. She summons a weapon from within her gem, something she was hoping she wouldn't have to use. A breaking point. But not just any breaking point. It's one that's refined and capable of firing from long range. She aims it at White, and with slight hesitation, pulls the trigger. Steven opens his eyes only to find himself falling in midair, surrounded by white shards. He looks directly ahead to find White herself falling over, her body slowly disintegrating, still falling towards the ground. Steven scans around to see Yellow and Blue have suffered the same fate. Reality starts to set in. The diamonds have been shattered. With the gems freed from White Diamond's trance, Garnet comes to her senses and high jumps, catching Steven. She profusely apologizes for failing to protect him. Bismuth drops the weapon with trembling hands, struggling to rationalize her actions as the diamond shards lie before her. She's conflicted. Shattering the diamonds was something she was certainly not against doing in the past. But now that she's actually done it, after Steven tried to show her that there could be a more peaceful resolution, the weight of taking the lives of others puts her in a state of shock. It's a lot to process even for her. Never before seen Homeworld gems arrive after the Mega Diamond did a number on Homeworld. They spot the crystal gems trying to escape, and some intervene. Fortunately, the crystal gems just barely fend off any oncoming attacks. It's a stressful race to get back to Pink's ship and disengage it from the rest of the Diamond Mech. Investigating the scene of the crime, other Homeworld gems find the remains of the Great Diamond Authority. Needless to say, it doesn't take long for the planet to fall into disarray. Over at Emerald's headquarters on Homeworld, one of her subordinates rushes in with the word of the Diamond's fall. Having the highest position of authority after the Diamonds, Emerald wants to assume leadership and lead a revenge-driven army to invade Earth and shatter the crystal gems, putting an end to the rebellion once and for all. The only problem is, she isn't the only Emerald who wants to be in charge. Go figure. They try to compromise and form the Great Emerald Authority to lead Homeworld. But then they can't decide who's going to be the leader of the leaders, resulting in two factions being formed: the Great Emerald Authority and the Greater Emerald Authority. Despite the namesake, it's not clear which one is actually better. The girlies are just fighting for real. Not only do we have two opposing forces trying to lead Homeworld, but the Crystal Gems' behavior at the Era 3 ball inspired a ton of gems to rebel now that the head honchos are no longer around. Frost Gem fusions are cropping up left and right, and more off-colors come out of hiding. Homeworld is in a state of free-for-all. Two warring upper crust factions, both hell-bent on getting their revenge on Earth, as well as a blossoming rebel alliance with a mix of gems that up until this point have never even existed. Things continue to be chaotic until both sides of the Emerald Authority are united by a special little ruby with an eye made of, well, a ruby, and an aquamarine with a tear-shaped gem on her cheek. Two gems who we know harbor an intense hatred for Steven Universe and want to avenge the Diamonds, fearing that something like this would happen in the first place. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the Crystal Gems are barely keeping it together. Bismuth not only feels more isolated from her friends than ever before, but she's also wrestling with her own moral code. Despite her good intentions, she's become recluse and extremely down on herself. Steven now lives in perpetual fear, afraid that Homeworld will inevitably seek their revenge. And well, yeah, he'd be right. He also can't shake the feeling of being a failure, like he let down the Crystal Gems, himself, and even his mother. He went to Homeworld with the goal of establishing peace across the galaxy and healing the corrupted gems. Now, without the Diamonds, neither can be achieved, as yellow, blue, and white's essence is needed to revert corrupted gems back to normal, and far too many gems on Homeworld are literally hardwired to obey the Diamonds. They can't accept a new way of life unless the Diamonds enable it. And right now, they're all too grief-stricken to do anything but exact revenge. Changing their way of life isn't exactly in the cards. Not wanting to lose their faith completely though, the Crystal Gems come to the conclusion that even if they need to defend their home, it isn't impossible for things to work out. Sadly, this isn't a story with a happy ending. By assembling an army consisting of Crystal Gems, off-colors, combat-trained townies, the Cluster, and a handful of rebel gems who escaped Homeworld, the team is simply outnumbered by Homeworld's invading forces. The Crystal Gems simply can't take on an army that large. The Earth is destroyed, and Homeworld immortalizes the Diamonds as martyrs. The Great Emerald Authority transforms Homeworld into a military state, cranking up the Diamonds' ideology to 100 and crushing anyone who stands in their way, gem or otherwise. Suffice to say, I don't think shattering the Diamonds would have been the greatest idea, as it runs the risk of way too much chaos, and would only leave the Crystal Gems outnumbered against a vengeful Homeworld army. But I don't want to end this on a total downer note, so let's explore an alternate ending to the alternate ending. One that's a bit more optimistic. If you want to help us afford more cool art, consider supporting us for only $1 over on our Patreon, powered by the creative voices of today like Pixie Bean Animation, who has their own indie animated series, Piggly's Adventure, a comical cartoon following Piggly, a talking pig on an island filled with magic and spirits, going on adventures with his friends. There's just shorts now, but the channel plans on expanding into longer episodes that explore the backstory of the mysterious island, Kun Kun, and its strange inhabitants. You can peep Piggly's Adventure in the description of this vid, and thanks again to Pixie Bean Animation for supporting us. Steven, realizing that the homeworld gems need a diamond to permit them to change their ways, comes to the conclusion that he needs to go back to homeworld, as he is, himself, a diamond. It's risky and a long shot, but right now, it seems like his best bet for a peaceful resolution. Hiding will only result in homeworld invading Earth. The other crystal gems strictly forbid Steven from leaving, not allowing him anywhere near the ship. It's too dangerous. Garnet foresees disaster, unless... Soon after, Lars and the Off-Colors arrive on Earth. They've been receiving transmissions from Homeworld via rebel factions of Off-Colors and mismatched fusions. He warns the Crystal Gems of the Emerald Authority and informs them that there are tons of rebel gems on Homeworld fighting against the new regime. With this newfound information, all of the Crystal Gems band together once more to Homeworld in hopes of teaming up with the new rebels and campaigning Steven as the new Diamond leader. A leader of peace and freedom for the gems to express themselves. After all, he is technically the next rightful heir to the throne. The crew boards Pink's ship and sets sail. Crystal Gems and Off-Colors together, along with Lion and Connie. One member is missing, however, Bismuth. After the emotional turmoil she's caused, she doesn't trust herself to come on board. In fact, she's nowhere to be found. She bought a Lapis! With no time to waste, the crew have to leave her behind. This marks a new journey, a season 6 of Steven Universe. During their journey to Homeworld, they stop by various planets and Homeworld colonies to gather more recruits and supplies. Lars has become quite versed in the cosmos and knows exactly where they need to go. One of these colonies even includes Sneeple. Yeah, you thought we forgot about Sneeple, didn't ya? This presents a great opportunity to see even more of Homeworld's damage to the universe, and even meet some new alien species. And since the towny episodes would have to take a backseat, maybe some of the lighthearted standalone episodes could take place on new planets with new one-off characters, dealing with any foes that threaten their new friends. Kinda Freak of the Week style. Once the team finally arrives on Homeworld, they're stacked with new crew members, weapons, and technology. They land in a secret base where rebels are stationed, and Steven and co prepare their plea for Homeworld. As to be expected, the Emerald Authority isn't having it, and before long, a new Homeworld civil war begins. Yeah, Era 3 isn't turning out so hot. While the Emeralds have agreed to band together, there is still much infighting, which leads to a lack of trust, lack of organization, and betrayal along the way. Steven, being Steven, tries his best to fight this war as peacefully as possible, allowing him to see how hard all of this must have been for Rose, having to do things peacefully but forcefully. He also begins to better understand Bismuth's point of view, though he still doesn't see eye to eye with her. Luckily, before the crystal gems are absolutely cooked, Bismuth lands on Homeworld, having jacked the sun incinerator. But this time, she arrives with a gift. She explains that when she was on Earth, she created a drill that went down to the cluster, where she would meditate for days on end, sometimes weeks, trying to communicate with the cluster in an attempt to repent for her actions. Something about communicating with shattered gems brought her a sense of forgiveness within herself for what she did to the diamonds. After much patience, they were able to fully communicate. The cluster saw Bismuth's pain, her regret, her desire to protect those she loves. So, they offer to help her. With the cluster's gracious permission, Bismuth chips off pieces of it and takes them back to her forge, where she creates suits of armor for the crystal gems, forged from the cluster bits, imbued with the spirit of their fallen soldiers, a symbol of protection and their connections to the ones they care about. Bismuth hashes things out with the rest of the gems, and apologizes for taking such extreme measures, which only made things worse. Since time had passed, the other gems had cooled off and they understand why she did what she did. Successfully taking down the Great Emerald Authority and appeasing the Homeworld, Steven is able to become leader of the gems through love, peace, and of course, a whole lot of crying and singing. He establishes democracy on Homeworld and appoints various trusted gems to lead a new government. With the conflict seemingly resolved, Steven and the Crystal Gems head back to Earth, where he lives a regular human life for a while. So yeah, no Steven Universe future in this timeline. At least, not the story that we're familiar with. And there you have it. I know this was a pretty dark start to the what ifs, but it's the kind of darkness that Steven was trying to avoid in the first place. War isn't fun, and without a peaceful resolution, I don't believe he could have saved his friends. That said, I hope this video was able to get your own creativity flowing. If you have your own alternate endings in mind, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Shout out to the homie Jakey Bones for the thumbnail, and the homie Michael for helping flesh out the script. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next video. What if the diamonds were bubbled? Peace.